Welcome to Scott Fox After 9. Really glad you could check into this episode. Today is going to be very, very similar to yesterday's because I got to follow up on a whole bunch of different things that have happened in the last 24 hours. So in this episode, I'm going to be talking about the speed enforcement cameras again, and I think that story is finally coming to an end. I'm also going to talk about Tylenol during pregnancy because the last 24 hours has been downright scary, but also amazing at the same time. It's almost like a light bulb is starting to go off over certain people's heads. So I'm going to talk about that on this episode. I do have an update on the gun confiscation program. We still have the public safety minister sitting as the public safety minister. Amazing to most people that this guy hasn't been fired yet. And I'm also, if I've got time, going to talk a little bit about something that I vowed to talk more about after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Political discourse. Political discourse is the ability to disagree with someone's political ideology or their opinion and still do it civilly. Have a debate. And some of the stuff that's come out of the last 24 hours is also wild. So all that and more coming up on this episode. Give me about 45 minutes or so, and I'm going to try and give you a real good package with a little clarity, a little insight, and a counter narrative to what you're seeing in the mainstream media. And I think mainstream media is a great place to start. I was driving into work today to do my FM radio show, and you can hear me weekday mornings on Light 92.1 FM all across Southern Ontario. Great station, big signal. Love to have you as a listener if you listen to FM radio. And as I was driving in today, I heard a local news station talking about the fact that today, Ontario Premier Doug Ford is going to introduce legislation to get rid of the speed enforcement cameras. And I think this is part of the problem. You know, this is a news station and people are programmed to trust the news. Hey, if it's on the news, it's got to be true. Well, this news segment, and I'm going to use air quotes when I say news, was basically a propaganda piece. And it was very obvious to me, but what I'm worried about is that it's not obvious to everybody. They were criticizing the premier for doing this. They say there's a CAA study out that says 75% of Canadians love the idea of speed cameras. And I've offered to debunk that survey many times. Only 1,500 people took it. There's not a lot of methodology cited in that survey. And frankly, I don't even know what question they asked people specifically to come to the conclusion that 75% support speed enforcement cameras, because I don't believe it. I think that's a preposterous number. They also cited the infamous Sick Kids survey that says, these cameras save lives. And in case you haven't guessed yet, and maybe you're a brand new listener, here's my bias. I am 100% against these speed enforcement cameras. I think that they are nothing but a cash grab from cities who are trying anything they can to get more money in, because we have municipal elections coming up next fall in Ontario. And that means that these politicians who are in power now locally are going to have to raise everyone's taxes again in the spring and then ask you for their vote. So they're going to try and raise money in any way that they can to minimize the property tax increase, because they know that's not going to be popular when it comes to election time next year. Well, I'm here to let you know that I am working on something that I'm going to release in the new year, and it's going to be a helpful little kit that if you're considering running for municipal government, I will be able to help you out. And I'm going to do that, like I said, early in the new year. So not a lot of details now, but stay tuned on that. See, my philosophy is next fall, we fire them all. And right now, it's all about taking names, figuring out which of these politicians are on the side of a cash grab and which of these politicians are on the side of actual public safety. And I maintain that these cameras are not about public safety. There's many, many, many different ways that they could control the flow of traffic in all the ways that we always have before these speed enforcement cameras came along. But a lot of these mayors and chairs and city councilors are drunk on spending. They cannot control themselves. It never even occurred to them to spend less next year than they're spending this year, and they're going to raise your taxes, and they still want the money from these speed enforcement cameras. cameras. Well, yesterday, Joker number one, the mayor of Toronto, Olivia Chow, she did a news conference, and the whole point of the news conference was to talk about some of the extra services that they're going to be adding to Toronto Transit. Before I play Olivia talking about the speed enforcement cameras, this is Mayor Chow talking about what we have to do now to protect folks who are riding the subway.
Today, I am announcing that the Toronto Crisis Services will be in TTC Station, offering appropriate expert care to people experiencing mental health illness and keeping riders safe at the meantime. We'll have highly visible crisis workers in uniform on the subway to help riders to deal with or respond to those other riders who may be experiencing a mental health crisis.
Wow. It is so bad in Toronto, which is basically a lawless city. The police seem to have lost all control. There's gunfights happening regularly. I mean, it's just a disaster. And part of the reason that so many people who live in the greater Toronto area don't even like going to Toronto because it just doesn't feel safe in a lot of cases. And there's some of the evidence to back that up. It is so unsafe riding the TTC that not only did they have their initial run of TTC special constables, then things got so bad with crime and harassment on the transit system that they had to bring in extra supports from the Toronto police. And that still didn't solve the problem. So now they're bringing in mental health crisis experts that are going to stand on the platform just waiting for somebody to come unglued and start doing something crazy. That's how bad it is that we now have the TTC cops, the regular cops, and mental health crisis workers in the subway system just to manage the amount of harassment that's going on and manage the situation, because those who take it every day will tell you it doesn't feel safe riding transit. And that's the result of the lawless city that we have in Toronto now. It doesn't seem like there's any punishment for crimes. People are broke, and when the economy is bad, crime accelerates. And it seems to be playing out in real time in Toronto. I can't believe they've had to take that step now to bring in mental health crisis workers, very visible. They're going to be on the platform, and you can summons them anytime somebody is losing their mind on you on the subway or doing God knows what else. Scary, scary stuff that's what it has come to in Toronto. But that's not the main reason I wanted to play Mayor Chow. I'd like to play a little bit of her talking about how much she loves speed enforcement cameras. Take it away, Olivia.
Speed kills. Torontonians, especially those most vulnerable, like children, need to be safe. And we know speed camera works. It reduces speed. And we know speed kills. And that is why Toronto will always support having speed camera to make sure that our most vulnerable are protected.
Okay, so the mayor there has not learned anything from the criticism that is coming in, not just from me, but from a wide range of commentators and pundits, and definitely different from the narrative you're hearing on the news. So let me just, you've probably heard me litigate this argument. I'll just do it again in brief. Olivia says we need to protect the children. We need to protect the seniors. And she does that to gaslight people into thinking senior citizens and children are going to die if we don't have speed enforcement cameras. I'm here to tell you that it's all about the money. It's not really about public safety. Toronto's been trying to run Vision Zero, which would be zero pedestrian fatalities, for years with limited results so far. An improvement for sure, but there's still a problem. Is that because of speed enforcement cameras? There's just not enough of them. Is that why people are still getting killed? No, absolutely not. If you want people to go slower, well, there's a lot of different ways to do that. Premier Ford is going to announce a few of them today. Speed bumps is the most common and practical one. There's also flashing lights. There's the circles. There's painted narrowing lines, which always slow people down. There's a lot of ways to do it, but the problem with those ways is they don't generate millions and millions of dollars for Olivia Chow, who can't control her spending. So when Olivia comes out and gaslights people into thinking children are going to die if we don't have speed enforcement cameras, it's simply not true. It's not. And by the way, If they were that integral in protecting the public, why don't we have them everywhere? Why aren't they on every single street? Why are they on so many streets where they've now reduced the speed limit? Because they seem to generate a lot of ticket revenue in those areas. You know, they're not in every school zone or public safety zone. Does that mean the city is negligent in their responsibilities? There's so many different arguments for why these cameras are not good, not the least of which is they're unfair to people. You can't even fight these tickets in most cases. It's very arbitrary. They're set very low. People are getting tickets for doing very, very small amounts over the limit. And Premier Ford is quite right when he says it's not fair. It's a cash grab. So here. Doug Ford, you go ahead and do your news conference. It's coming up at 11 a.m. As I record right now, it's a little after 10 a.m. So I'm not going to have any of that news conference today, but I will do my best in whatever comes out tomorrow to play that for you here in After 9. Although I also want to remind you, tomorrow is a listener DM Friday, and I've still got room for a couple of more if you get those in quick. One more thing on these cameras. In addition to Olivia Chow crying about seniors and kids getting killed if they can't keep their speed enforcement cameras, the police chief of Toronto, Myron Demkew, also weighed in.
When we consider our approach to road safety, we need to look at it, I'd step back and look at all the things that are happening. Cameras is one part of Vision Zero. There's a number of other things happening, everything from environmental design and importantly, police enforcement. So we remain laser focused on enforcing the Highway Traffic Act, particularly around things like aggressive, dangerous driving, speeding, and the things that we know cause harm and kill people on our roadways.
Okay, that's the chief of police walking things back a little bit because the Association of Chiefs of Police says they endorse these cameras and they cited the same nonsense from CAA and the Sick Kids Survey. That's really all they've got saying that these cameras are helpful. At least the police chief can acknowledge this is a police responsibility to enforce the Highway Traffic Act. If people are speeding, this is a police matter. I also had a great DM from a listener the other day who pointed out something that I hadn't even considered about these speed enforcement cameras. When we put those up, it minimizes the need to have a police officer in that area. Well, that allows other areas of crime to thrive. It also allows people to get away with things. You know, if someone were speeding through a school zone and a camera picked up their license plate and sent them a ticket, I don't know, maybe they'll pay it, maybe they won't, maybe the car's stolen, maybe it's not. If an actual police officer intervened there, they'd be able to do things like find out what that person is up to. Are they committing another crime? What's in the vehicle? All those sort of things that police inquire about when they pull somebody over. And if we tell police, you know what, you don't have to worry about this anymore. We're missing an opportunity to proactively catch some of the bad guys that are running around on our streets. Every day, it seems, I get a news release from at least one different police force that says somebody was stopped for speeding and police found a loaded gun or drugs in their car. We are not letting police off the hook. It's still their job to enforce the law, including the driving laws. So that's at least somewhat of a walk back from Toronto's chief of police. And when the premier does his news conference, like I said, if anything good comes out of it, I'll have that for you tomorrow. But either way, I'm in full support of Doug doing that. We got some good news yesterday. The ostriches are going to live to see another day. Not necessarily 2 days or more, but for now, the ostriches got saved. And I want to thank everybody who heard my story yesterday in the podcast and thought, you know what, I'm going to get involved in this. I really want to do something to try and help these ostriches because I don't think it's right that the Canadian government and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency can just order the cull of 400 beautiful ostriches that aren't sick and may even be able to unlock the cure to future disease or virus because they likely have some antibodies. To me, it's a very common sense thing. If they've survived bird flu, then they've probably got antibodies. Let's study them. And that's all the people who operate that ostrich sanctuary have been saying since day one. Don't kill them. Let's study them. Here's a little bit yesterday of the crowd getting fired up when they found out that the Supreme Court of Canada has granted a temporary stay to save the birds.
Oh, they got it! Yes! Oh, my Lord! They got the stay! Let's hear it.
The matter of the fact is, we're all here to celebrate today.
No, Kev! Yes!
I'm happy for them. You know, they took on a cause, and I feel like that's a fight worth fighting to try and save the lives of these birds who don't have a voice. I'm happy for the organizers of this protest. I think it's great that the Supreme Court gave a temporary stay. I just hope that we can now have an adult conversation about this and where we go from here. I don't think anybody wants bird flu to spread, but there's also no evidence that these ostriches have bird flu. And I think that's something important to keep in mind. I'm going to switch topics again. Now let's get to yesterday in Ottawa. Only one time this week is the Prime Minister in the House of Commons for question period. He has booked so many trips for this fall. He is everywhere, and he's got a built-in excuse. He runs around and says, well, we're in this existential crisis, and I got to try and work out deals and promote Canada around the world. And really what he's doing is handing out all kinds of money. He gave more money to Haiti. He's given more money to Ukraine. It's wild how much this guy is just pushing out the door right now. But yesterday, the one day he didn't have a trip booked, he was in the House of Commons for a one-day only showdown with the leader of the opposition, Pierre Poilievre. Now, the hot topic in Ottawa right now, there's a number of them going. I played this in the pod the other day. The Liberals voted against a Conservative motion to keep repeat violent offenders behind bars. That's right, they voted against it. And I know that that's shocking. Well, they also voted against another Conservative motion to lift the cap on oil and gas production here in Canada. That's right. The Liberals voted against it. Here is the opposition leader in the House, Andrew Scheer, talking about that. This is about a minute and a half long, but I think worth listening to.
We've just witnessed the Carney Liberals vote in favor of keeping the oil and gas production cap. Every Liberal just voted to keep in Justin Trudeau's policy of capping the production of Canadian oil and gas. What does that mean? It means Mark Carney has decided to keep the failed Liberal policy that chased away billions of dollars of investment in the Canadian energy sector. The Parliamentary Budget Officer, the independent budget watchdog, estimates that this policy will cost the Canadian economy $20 billion in lost GDP. There's an announcement this week. TC Energy used to be called TransCanada Energy, investing $8.5 billion in the energy sector in the United States. Keeping this production cap in place will mean more stories like TC Energy, Canadian companies taking investment dollars out of Canada, investing in the United States. It also will mean lost jobs. At a time when employment is going up, as young people struggle to find work, this production cap will kill thousands of opportunities for young men and women going into the skilled trades. It'll also deprive provincial governments of much needed revenue collected in royalties to pay for roads, schools, and hospitals. Today's vote proves that Mark Carney is just trying to pull another bait and switch, saying one thing during the election when he needed Canadians' votes, pretending that he would do things differently from Justin Trudeau, but after the election, when the chips are down, when the vote is taken in the House of Commons, he stands up and does exactly the same thing that Liberals have been doing for the last 10 years, attacks our energy sector, and votes to keep our oil and gas in the ground.
That's fair, right? That's all true. They did vote against a Conservative motion to lift the cap on Canadian oil and gas production. There's a pattern for me here. If I could point this out, maybe you haven't noticed it, but I certainly have. What Mr. Scheer there said is quite right. You know, during the election campaign, we were led to believe it was going to be different from Justin Trudeau. We were led to believe that Mark Carney is a business guy and he is going to do what we have to do to make Canada thrive. Isn't job one to lift the cap on the Canadian oil and gas production? Why would we intentionally cap ourselves? It doesn't make any sense to me. You know, we were told that we were going to get safer streets. It's been 6 months and nothing has changed. In fact, crime seems to be getting worse. And by the way, it's going to keep getting worse because as the economy gets worse, crime gets worse. We've always known that. It's been that way since the beginning of time. When people are struggling, when they don't have money, they resort to crime. They also resort to drugs to try and compensate. And the drugs lead to more crime. So we're going into a bad space there. When the Liberals had a chance to keep violent repeat offenders in jail, this was a Conservative motion on Tuesday, they voted against it. I mean, what we saw during the campaign and what's actually playing out now in real time is very, very different. They said one thing, they're doing another. And the other is exactly what Justin Trudeau used to do. I mean, we watched that play out for 10 years. That's part of the reason most of the country hated the guy at this time last year. I don't know how to explain it. I mean, if you watch the news, they really sugarcoat it. They really downplay it, if they even report on this stuff at all. I really don't understand why we're not making any progress here. You know, Premier Ford in Ontario, he called for all levels of government and all parties to work together. You know, if the Liberals were interested in working with the opposition, you would think it would be a no-brainer to vote to lift the cap on oil and gas production in Canada. If they were really working together, you would think the Liberals would vote in order to keep violent repeat offenders behind bars. I mean, just this week, they've said no to both of those things. But the other thing that's on a lot of people's minds right now is this gun buyback program. I think by and large, if I'm reading the room right, it seems like people would like some comfort and peace of mind that the guns that Canadians own in their homes are not assault-style rifles and firearms like you hear about in these mass shootings in America. I don't think the average Canadian wants to know that their neighbor has one of those guns. I understand that. And, you know, maybe there could have been a compromise here in that most guns are perfectly legal. We've always had the restricted and non-restricted categories here in Canada. It's two different licenses, a different course. It's a longer course to take if you want a restricted firearm. That would be handguns and stuff like that. But the Liberals banned handguns altogether. The only way to get one is on the street. You can't go and buy one or import one to Canada. You just can't do it. In fact, if you own one, you can't even transfer it to someone else. Nothing with handguns. And those fell into the restricted category. Well, when it comes to the hunting rifles, shotguns, and things like that, the Liberals said they were going to do this gun confiscation program to get those off the street. And in reality, what they've done is created this massive list of weapons that are, if I'm being honest, really not the kind of thing that someone would use if they were committing a crime. They're just not. They're designed for hunting and trap shooting and target practice and things like that. They wouldn't even be practical to use in the commitment of a crime. So we know there's no real danger there. And we also know that the statistics back that up. We know that the vast majority of the crime is coming from the illegal guns. We also had the public safety minister caught in a call that was recorded, not a call, it was a conversation that was recorded and leaked where the public safety minister himself said this is a bad idea, it's going to go over budget, and it's not going to be effective. Well, even though he said that, those were his words, he's trying to walk it back and say, I was taken out of context, I was kidding. Even the prime minister, so far, has got his back. And I think that every day the prime minister doesn't fire that public safety minister, it actually looks worse and worse on the prime minister, because that's terrible judgment to have this guy in charge in the first place, to let him stay in charge after that call came out. I don't know what we're doing there. But I want to take you to yesterday, because the prime minister was in the House of Commons again only once this week. So that was the only chance Pierre Poilievre had to ask Prime Minister Carney about this gun buyback program. Listen to some of this.
Admitted that going after farmers and hunters hunt rifles is not going to fight crime. So the only reason to do this is politics. If he was telling the truth, then why not reverse? If not, why isn't he fired?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the gun registry, what the government is doing with the gun registry is putting in place a much more efficient way. An efficient way for Canadians to voluntarily return prohibited firearms, for fair compensation. This government is going to do it right.
If you listen to yesterday's podcast, I played some great audio for you from the public safety minister and some of his associates that basically confirms when they say it's voluntary, it's not voluntary. It's voluntary at first, but if you don't eventually comply within the Liberal timeline, then you are a criminal. They're going to make you a criminal if you have one of these firearms and don't voluntarily comply. So when the Prime Minister says that, it is very misleading, but let's hear the rest of the follow-up here.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
But his own Minister of Public Safety says this government is doing it wrong. He was caught on tape saying the program won't work, and yet they are going to rip $750 million away from our border and police services to harass duck hunters and farmers by banning the firearms they use. This approach has led to a 130% increase in gun crime under the Liberals' watch. The police say they won't implement it. The minister says it's a bad idea, but they're only doing it for political reasons. Why is the Prime Minister putting lives at risk for politics?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I don't even know where to begin with that.
That's right.
First off, I don't know where to begin because of all the misrepresentations in that intervention.
That's right.
The person who's putting lives at risk is the Leader of the Opposition who's voted against every single piece of gun legislation. What the Minister of Public Safety is doing it right. He's correcting an inefficient system to provide Canadians with fair...
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I'll play the rest of that exchange for you in just a sec. I just want to point out that that's a real heavy spin there from the Prime Minister to try and turn it around. I mean, it's par for the course with this government. They do this. It's a strategy of theirs to turn it around and say, no, we're not doing that. You're doing that. But to say Pierre Poilievre, the guy who has been begging to keep violent repeat offenders behind bars, who has been begging for mandatory minimum sentences and a complete reform of our criminal justice system, for the guy who said, let's leave that extra money that you want to spend buying back these guns, let's leave it with the CBSA and with the police so that they have more resources to go after the people with illegal guns that are using them in committing crimes. That's what Pierre Poilievre has been advocating for. For the Prime Minister to spin that around and say, you're the one putting lives in danger, I just don't know where the PM is coming from on that one. Like I said, that is one hell of a spin.
Position.
Mr. Speaker, I have voted against the Liberal policy of reducing criminal sentences for those who use guns to commit extortion, to commit robbery, and to commit other serious offenses, while voting in favor of locking up criminals who use guns in the commission of crime. The police say that 90% of crime is done with guns that come illegally over the broken Liberal border. The Liberal Public Safety Minister admits that the Prime Minister is only playing politics. Will the Prime Minister stop the politics, fire the Minister, and leave Grandpa Joe's hunting rifle alone?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Once again, Mr. Speaker, I will have too little time to address all the issues, but let me go back to something the Leader of the Opposition said, which he described farmers, duck hunters using AR-15s to hunt. I don't see that. I don't see that in my great province of Alberta. I also know that what the Minister of Public Safety and this government are doing is tightening the border. Bill C-2, will the opposition stand up and support the tightening of the border?
It's turning into a circus again here, guys. I hate to say it, but it's really turning into a circus again. Why can't we just have adults argue policy and make a point that makes sense and that's truthful and actually hash out the issues? Hash out the issues. That's the point of question period. Hey, you guys want to waste a lot of money here buying up these guns that are not part of the crime problem. How about we reallocate that money to the CBSA? Could we agree on that? I don't know why we wouldn't be able to agree on that. But the problem here is politics get in the way. And I don't understand what it's going to take for these elected individuals to understand we, the people, the middle class, have had enough of them fighting, and we really just want progress made. We want safe streets. We want a much, much, much better economy. By the way, our dollar this morning was trading below 72 cents US. It was 71.97 in overseas trading. Our economy is in rough shape here, folks. We've got a major housing problem. We've got an immigration problem. We've got a crime problem. There are so many issues that need to be worked out, and these are the games that people are playing. You just heard the Prime Minister there spinning stuff. You don't hunt for ducks with an AR-15. I mean, there's lots of different guns. Fine. Nobody's using their AR. I don't even know anyone that has an AR-15, to be honest with you, but I'm going to leave it there. I think you heard what it was. I think most people, even the most partisan ones, can agree that was really, really unproductive, unhelpful, didn't move the debate forward. In my estimation, the questions that Pierre Poilievre were asking were fair questions. Hey, why don't we reallocate that money back to the CBSA and to police forces and go after actual criminals instead of going ahead with this program that the public safety minister, whose program it is, even he thinks it's a bad idea and it's not going to work anyway, and it's going to go over budget and waste a whole ton of money. That's what's at stake here. More money wasted and not solving one of the problems that we have to deal with. I'm going to move on from that, but there is one more that I want to play. Since the Prime Minister is only in the House once this week, again, he has stacked his itinerary with a ton of trips coming up so that he doesn't have to be in the House. And frankly, I don't blame him. When I look at that motley crew sitting behind him and all the baggage they've got that's linked to Justin Trudeau, I don't blame Carney for not wanting to be there. He is getting run over in Parliament by the opposition, and a lot of it isn't really even him. It's the people sitting behind him. But there is one thing that is going to fall squarely on the shoulders of the Prime Minister, and that is his proposal to limit the use of the notwithstanding clause. When this first came up late last week, a number of people messaged me about it. They wanted to know what I thought, help them form an opinion on this topic. So let's go through a little bit of what happened yesterday when the notwithstanding clause came up in the House of Commons.
What protects Canadians?
I will warn you, by the way, this is the Prime Minister and the leader of the Bloc Québécois speaking through a translator because this portion of question period was done in French.
What protects Canadians and Quebecers, men and women, young people and older people? What protects us all is the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It is the Government of Canada's responsibility to defend the Charter.
So that was Prime Minister Carney's initial response to a question about a topic that the Bloc Québécois in particular is very interested in. Yves-François Blanchet is the leader of the Bloc. And what the Liberals have proposed is they've asked the Supreme Court to weigh in on the use of the notwithstanding clause. They would like to limit the use of the notwithstanding clause. And for anyone who doesn't know, when we signed our Constitution, there was a part put in there in our charter that is a clause that provinces can use to override a court ruling. So as it is, we've got all these elected individuals, more than 300 of them in Ottawa, that create laws. Then those laws need to be certified by the Senate. Then the Governor General will sign off on the law, and the law is the law. Yet just about any judge across Canada could decide those 500 plus people don't know what the heck they're doing. I think that's unconstitutional, and I'm going to rule or overrule the government. And then the law changes. And that might be crazy to some, that one judge can overrule the will of the House, the Senate, and the Governor General. But that's the way the system works. Now, we have a notwithstanding clause that allows all of the provinces to basically opt out. Just about any of the provinces could use the notwithstanding clause, and it would simply read, notwithstanding that judge's ruling, the actual law will continue to be this. And there's some limitations, time limitations in particular, for using the notwithstanding clause, but it has an important place in our system of government. You know, that was part of the reason that we found a deal on the Constitution. And a lot of people won't even accept the Constitution without the notwithstanding clause. But the Carney government has asked the Supreme Court to weigh in on when it can and can't be used. So that's just a little primer. There's a lot more to it. I'm just giving you the basics here. And now here is Yves-François Blanchet responding to what the Prime Minister just said. Again, he's speaking through a translator.
I want all Quebecers to see all these Liberals rising to collectively insult them. I'd like the Prime Minister to explain to me why, in his factum, he felt it was necessary to mention that Quebec might possibly bring back forced labor, slavery. There's also mention of racism. I'd like the Prime Minister to explain to me why Quebecers who live in the most progressive society in the Americas would bring back summary executions and death sentences. Why would he allow such insults to be written? There is a charter.
Here is the Prime Minister.
A charter of rights and freedoms. These are the rights and freedoms of Quebecers and of Canadians. It is the Government of Canada's job to defend it. There's also a constitution. It was
Okay, I mean, they're going back and forth real quick. The Prime Minister fluffed off that question there from Yves-François Blanchet. He didn't even try and answer that one, which is uncharacteristic of him, because I do give him credit for usually at least attempting to answer a question. Here's the response from Yves-François Blanchet.
Imposed on us and includes the notwithstanding clause, which we have the right to invoke. The government is opposed to the clause. And they have also leveled incredibly insulting criticisms at Quebec and at other Canadian provinces. Will the Prime Minister do the only decent thing, which would be to withdraw the factum and to apologize to Quebecers?
And now Prime Minister Carney's response.
The government will not backtrack. We are defending the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. As for invoking the notwithstanding clause, that decision is up to the Supreme Court of Canada.
No, it's up to the collective of provinces, actually. You know, sometimes I think the federal government forgets that they're really just there to manage the affairs of the provinces on a national level. Canada is very much a collective of all of our provinces and territories. The federal government doesn't really get to make decisions like that. We give them the power to make decisions like that. For them to abdicate their responsibility and pass that off to the Supreme Court, it's almost like they're begging for a unity crisis in Canada. And I assure you, there is 100% going to be a national unity crisis in Canada if the government goes ahead with this. And if, God forbid, the Supreme Court tries to restrict provinces from using the notwithstanding clause, we're going to be in a real bad situation. And you can expect these provinces to line up first. Quebec, 1. Alberta, 2. Saskatchewan, 3. And I'm even guessing, if I have to, British Columbia will be 4th. I don't know about Ontario. I haven't heard Doug Ford's stance on this, but I do know that Doug Ford has invoked the notwithstanding clause in the past. I don't think anybody wants to lose or have their right to use it limited based on something that the Carney government doesn't even want to speak to Canadians about. They've just fluffed it off to the Supreme Court and let them make a decision. I don't even know if the Constitution would remain intact if they sever that part of it from the Constitution. You know what I mean? Anyway, that topic is going to come up again. You know it is. And my prediction is that's going to be a real smoking gun when we come time to make a decision about Mark Carney. That's going to be something where everyone will be able to look back and say, that right there, that is where you lost me. Because I think there's a lot of people that believe firmly in our charter and our Constitution, and they don't want to see this government take it on, but without taking it on by fluffing it off to the Supreme Court. Something else I want to play for you before I get to the talk about Tylenol and political discourse. There are committee hearings happening all the time in Ottawa, and there is a Heritage Committee that's meeting right now. And one of the members of Parliament asked the Minister of Heritage, that is Stephen Guilbeault. You likely remember him as our former Environment Minister. Now he's in charge of Heritage and Canadian history or something. I don't even know. I don't know why he's in this position or why he's still in cabinet, to be honest with you. But he was asked about some of the controversy surrounding Travis Danraj and the CBC. Give this a listen.
Travis Danraj was employed by the CBC as a news broadcaster, and this summer he launched a human rights complaint against the CBC, alleging that they had created what he calls a toxic work environment. He says that he faced discrimination, bullying, and harassment as a person of color. In an email that he sent out announcing his new podcast, he stated, and I'll quote, "To be honest, this has been the hardest period of my life. What happened at CBC really broke me," end quote. Minister, according to the Government of Canada's own website, the CBC is a Crown corporation that operates at an arm's length from government, but it is ultimately accountable to Parliament through the responsible minister, which in this case would be you. Have you reached out to the CEO of the CBC regarding this situation and the toxic work environment that is being accused there?
Merci pour la question. Donc, comme vous l'avez...
Thank you for the question. As you said, first of all, I deplore what happened to this employee of CBC. As a government, we expect that all government-related organizations create a healthy work environment for everyone. The government role is not to get mixed into the daily operations and management of the organization. That is in the purview of the organization, in this case, the public broadcaster, who also has a board of directors. Our role is to ensure that the public broadcaster plays its role and represents the values and Canadian culture.
Before I play the rest of that, interesting that he chose to speak in French there to answer it, and he did that because he knows that it's very unlikely it's going to make the news when he speaks in French. It's very unlikely to make the news in English Canada, which is where the CBC is most controversial. I do agree with Minister Guilbeault. It's not his job to manage the day-to-day affairs at the CBC, but he said it himself. He needs to make sure that the CBC is fulfilling its mandate and reflecting the will of Canadians. Travis Danraj claims that he was let go, namely because he had conservative values. And God forbid they allow any conservative or right-leaning values on the state broadcaster. They want that to remain basically a promotions arm for the Liberal government and for Liberal policies. They don't want you, when you're watching the mainstream media, especially our state broadcaster, to get both sides of the story. Even the pundits that they bring on, the ones that are supposed to represent the right, aren't all that right-leaning. It's very biased coverage, and I don't even need to explain it because I think just about everybody who wants to sees it. I think just about everybody understands that when you watch the CBC, you're getting their version of the story, not necessarily all of the facts. Here is the rest of, I should mention, this is Conservative MP Rachel Thomas that asked that question of Stephen Guilbeault. Here's her follow-up.
But this is not the first employee that's come forward with concerns. There's been numerous of concerns brought forward with regards to the toxic culture that exists at the CBC. Ultimately, you are responsible for having appointed the CEO, and she does answer to you as the minister. You have the ability to move her out should that be needed. Have you had a conversation with the CEO with regards to the toxic culture that exists there?
Comme vous le savez probablement, la nouvelle...
As you may know, the new CEO has been on the job since, 6 months? So since last December. I have had the pleasure of meeting her once since I have come to this job, and I imagine since she's on the job. And as I've repeated, our expectations as a government are, whether it be CBC Radio-Canada or any other Crown corporation or department, everything must be done.
I'm going to take that as a no, and I think that's incredibly shameful that as a minister you wouldn't take enough interest in the well-being.
You asked me if I met her, and I said I did.
To pick up the phone and just have a conversation with the CEO and figure out what the heck's going on there. I share my time with my colleague Carrie Diot.
Mr. Minister, I heard you say...
He fluffed it off. He was really not interested in answering that. And no, he hasn't had a conversation with the CEO about the culture at the CBC. Hey, that's enough of that one. So frustrating, you know, like these committee meetings are really supposed to drill down, and they say this is where the real work of government gets done, is in the committees. Well, you just heard it. Like, it doesn't sound like there's a whole lot of accountability there anyway, or ministers that even really care that much about their mandate. This is something that the Minister of Heritage in charge of the CBC should absolutely be interested in, is the culture at our state broadcaster. Is there bias against employees of color? Is there bias against those who have a right-leaning political ideology? These are fair questions, and frankly, I don't understand why we couldn't get a more fulsome answer from the Minister of Heritage about that one. I'm going to move on here because I realize I'm up against the clock, and I just want to say something. For the third day in a row, I have to talk about this because I'm kind of mortified at what I'm seeing online. I told you a couple of weeks ago that in September, the Trump administration is going to come forward with the results of some research that they've been working on regarding autism. And I'm also intimately aware that this topic affects a whole bunch of people, not just in America, but also in Canada. And there's a lot of people who would like to know things like, why is there such a huge spike in the number of cases where kids are born onto the autism spectrum? Why is it so much higher now than it ever used to be? What's different now than in the past? And I said, please, when the Trump administration comes out with their research, please take it with a grain of salt and try and if there's credible information there, even though it came from Donald Trump, please listen to what they're saying and let's consider it. Let's consider it on its scientific merit. Well, I think it was a real sloppy rollout. The other day, Donald Trump came out and I don't know why he did it, but he was the one who made the announcement that there is a link between use of Tylenol and autism's from women who are pregnant, kids born with autism. And it's amazing to me how some people thought, yeah, okay, I mean, we've known that for a while. Okay, great. Keep looking into it and let us know what you find. Many others, though, either fell victim to the story that was being told in the mainstream media or just instantly thought, that is ridiculous and Donald Trump is spreading disinformation and this is terrible, and they mocked it. And there's no shortage of videos going around of pregnant women popping Tylenol just out of spite to show Donald Trump it's safe. It's not new information. By now, if you have any social media, you've likely seen it get shared. A tweet that Tylenol themselves put out in 2017 saying, we actually don't recommend taking our product while you're pregnant. There has been numerous stories on CNN. I Googled it the other day. Numerous stories on CNN.com about a link between acetaminophen and possible complications from pregnancy. The CBC themselves did a story on it in 2021. Let me play just a little bit of this for you.
As if pregnancy weren't complicated enough, researchers are now cautioning acetaminophen, including Tylenol, might affect fetal development.
I found in my second trimester that I was in pain.
Priyanka Taneja went online. She knew most pain meds were off limits, but
word on the street was that Tylenol was just fine. And it wasn't until I Googled it that I read, that actually there is a limit.
In a new consensus statement, international scientists insist there's a growing body of research suggesting acetaminophen could increase the risks of certain neurodevelopmental, reproductive, and urogenital disorders.
I'm not going to play the whole report, but that was a CBC report. This was Canada in 2021. We've known this for a while. It wasn't surprising information. And I tried to be real gentle with this the other day after the president rolled it out. Again, I know there's people who don't like Donald Trump and they think that if they listen to him, they're in some way betraying their own values. And I don't understand that personally, but you're welcome to feel however you want to feel about the president. I thought it would have been much more impactful if he would have rolled out, a pediatrician from St. Jude's Hospital or something like that. Someone from the Cleveland Clinic or the Mayo Clinic. Bring them in to explain it. Trump himself doing it was going to be a problem. And sure enough, it has turned into a problem because there's so many people that just don't like Donald Trump that they're doing things like going and popping a whole ton of Advil on TikTok to try and prove that Donald Trump doesn't know what he's talking about and Tylenol is safe. Listen, you got to look into this. If you're pregnant, please look into this. There is a link. This is not new. What Donald Trump said the other day is not new information. This has been out there in the public domain for a long time. It's amazing how many doctors I'm seeing on X in particular that are still trying to argue this. Health Canada just yesterday came out and they're not saying use it with caution or anything like that. They're still saying it's safe to use during pregnancy. They're saying the risk of a fever is far worse, so you should still take the Tylenol. This is our national health body saying that when we now know, and everybody should have seen the receipts at this point, that there is a link. I just want to say, and this is not a defense of Donald Trump, this is me worried about the future generation here. There is a link. It's been studied before. It's been studied again now, and they found the same thing. There is a link. Please look into this and do your research. And when I say do your research, I don't just mean go in and talk to your OBGYN, or don't just go in and talk to your kid's future pediatrician or your family doctor. Doctors are trained from the day they walk into medical school to trust the establishment. Me personally, almost everything my doctor tells me, I take with a grain of salt because I've had conversations with my doctor and I've asked her, hey, do you think I should see an osteopath? Do you think I should consider seeing a nutritionist? Do you think I should go for acupuncture? My doctor doesn't believe in any of that stuff, but I did it anyway because I know it works and it's effective for me. So I do take things with a grain of salt. Now, if I have an infection and I need a prescription, of course, I'm going to go see my doctor and I'll trust her recommendation on which medication to take. But by and large, I think we need to be bigger advocates for our own health. And when we're talking about the development of an unborn fetus, I think we need to be ultra careful. Again, I understand that there's a lot of people out there who don't like Donald Trump, but just because you don't like him is not a reason to just completely write off everything he says. What he said yesterday or Monday or whenever it was he did that news conference was him basically in his roundabout rambling kind of way giving out information based on research that they looked at from Harvard. I'm not going to tell anybody how to run their pregnancy. You have to do what's best for you. Yes, you should absolutely talk to your doctor, but take in multiple different sources of information and try and aggregate it into what works best for you. Nobody's saying you can't take Tylenol. Nobody's saying if you take Tylenol, your kid will have autism. That's not what anyone is saying. They're saying there's a link. And I'm going to leave it at that. That's very similar to what I said yesterday. But I feel like this is an important message to get out there because there's a lot of people who just want to spite Donald Trump or they think they're betraying their own liberal values if they listen to what he says. And frankly, there's health risks here. Friends, I don't have time for anything else. I got to roll here. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Scott Fox After 9. I didn't get a chance to talk about discourse, but you know what? Maybe I'll just play this before I go. Hillary Clinton was on MSNBC yesterday. Just listen to a little bit of this. It's about 20 seconds long.
We have got to stop demonizing each other.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, I think most of that right now in our country's history is coming, from the right, coming from people who want to dominate. They want their point of view. Writing out slavery from history, that doesn't make it go away.
Nobody's writing history out of slavery. That is the former First Lady, a former candidate for President of the United States, and a real leader of the left saying, stop demonizing each other. But it's all happening on the right. That's not true. It's got to stop always. Hillary, what you just said there, not helpful. The guy who's going to be running for president in 3 more years, Gavin Newsom, is the governor of California. He's doing the late night circuit. Of course, he was on Jimmy Fallon the other night for his return. And last night he was on Stephen Colbert.
That's happening in the United States of America. Masked men jumping out of unmarked cars, people disappearing, no due process. No oversight, zero accountability happening in the United States of America today. People ask, well, is authoritarianism, you're being hyperbolic? Bull, we're being hyperbolic. If you're a black and brown community, it's here in this country. And so I'm deeply proud that I had the privilege of signing the nation's first bill to address the issue of masking. Also to require, you have simple identification, to your point. I mean, if some guy jumped out of an unmarked car in a van with a mask on, tried to grab me, I mean, by definition, you're going to push back. And so these are not just authoritarian tendencies. These are authoritarian actions by an authoritarian government. You saw what Stephen Miller said last week.
I'm going to leave him there. You're welcome to go back and watch the whole thing if you want. Calling them authoritarian because of the work that ICE is doing, trying to claim that ICE is somehow violating their rights. I mean, let's keep in mind, those people are being targeted because they're in the country illegally. They've already committed a crime and they're being apprehended and deported. That's not authoritarian. And when you say stuff like that, you're trying to incite violence because people are taught to rise up against authoritarian governments. That's not helping either. That's exactly the kind of stuff that has got to stop. Friends, tomorrow's the listener DM special, and I am real excited about it. I got some great questions in already. I've still got room for a few more if you want to slide into my DMs at Scott Fox On Air. Have yourselves a fantastic Thursday. Go Blue Jays, and I'll see you tomorrow. This is Pat James and The Whole Truth. Hey now.